My auntie, Mary Bell, is a residential school survivor and is our oldest surviving matriarch. She carries a lot of truth and a lot of pain.
In Sarain Fox's Anishinaabe culture, women are the knowledge keepers. But as the COVID-19 pandemic continues on, elders in Indigenous communities are at risk, and telling their stories becomes more and more urgent. In her powerful new documentary, Inendi, Sarain brings viewers along as she learns her family's history, and she joins us now. Hello.
Ani, hi guys.
Sarain, welcome back to the show. We're so delighted to have you. And part of the purpose you've said of making this documentary was that you personally feel a kind of responsibility to document these stories before they are lost. So tell us about that tradition.
Yeah, so I think that primarily because I'm the youngest, but also I think just because there's this pressure to record our stories, I think it's so important for us to take the time to listen. And so for me, it's been very clear to me that that would be my role in my family, is to just really find a way to pass these stories on. And my Auntie Mary, a couple years ago, she started asking questions about when I was going to take the time to tell her story, because I tell stories for a living as a storyteller.
Mm-hmm.
So a big part of this was just about finding the technology and these new ways and these new tools to tell my own story, especially now that there's this moment. The pandemic provided this perfect moment to do that.
You've been talking about your Auntie Mary Bell, a residential school survivor. And so some of her stories would probably be very hard to hear, like the fact that she was told she couldn't see her parents. And yet you go there. So can you sort of break down for us why it's important to retell specifically the difficult parts of these stories?
Yeah. So I think for so long, Indigenous people haven't been in charge of our own narratives. We haven't been able to use our own voices to tell our stories. And so for me, part of doing this work was just giving my Auntie Mary the opportunity to speak for herself. And I think that the truth of her story is that there are devastating experiences that she speaks to. And she openly speaks to them because that is her reality. And it was really hard to sit and listen to them. But I think the most incredible part about being able to bear witness to my auntie is that every time she tells a really hard story, she bookends it with a sense of humor. She'll find a way to make a joke and to make you laugh. And I just found that to be incredible. And I'm hoping to take that into my own life forever. It's just like to always find the moments where you can still express joy.
Watching it, I was brought to tears several times, and I don't, I know you, but I don't know your auntie. I don't know your family. But hearing it, brought up feelings for me as a parent, brought up feelings of empathy for everyone. I can't even imagine what it was like for you as a family member to hear these stories. So how was it? Like, what did it bring up for you to listen to these horrors?
Yeah, absolutely. So I think I often talk about blood memory, just the fact that these experiences exist within me just by way of being, connected to my auntie, that these are my ancestors. These happened to my family members. But I really needed my mom there. I was so grateful that my mom came to help me listen to those stories, because the truth is that that's trauma, and it's incredibly hard to hear. And so if it's incredibly hard for me to hear, and I already know these stories, I hope that Canadians and anyone else who didn't know about this, when they hear these stories, that they understand a new truth and a new reality in this country, and then that perhaps brings us closer together when we can see each other's humanity exposed. And that's what I'm really interested in, is like, we need to be telling truth. I'm only interested in lifting up truth right now. And my Auntie Mary was so brave in how she expressed her truth. And even though it was hard for me, I think that it's so important, because I want to make sure that this never happens again to anyone, but that it never happens again in this country and to my people. Because the policies that were put in place to eliminate my people, they are still existing in some ways today. And I really hope that the future that my daughter grows up in, that they won't be there, and that she will be able to be proud to be Indigenous and be safe in this country as an Indigenous woman.
Let's stick with the truth, because your auntie worked with the Truth and Reconciliation Commission, and when you interviewed her, she expressed some concerns about not being able to say certain things. Why is that?
Yeah. So in the documentary, I won't give too much away, but there's a moment when she talks about an interaction with the RCMP, where she tells the police what's happening to her, and she tells them that she needs help, and she speaks her truth. And she's a young person; she's a teenager when this happens, and she's put in the back of a police car and returned to this school that is a violent, unsafe place. And so, for all of my auntie's life, she's been taught that many of the places that we run to for safety are not safe for her. And that's the truth for so many Indigenous people, even today. So it makes sense to me that there was that fear. And I was so happy to be able to tell her, you know what, right now, you don't have to worry about that, because we are going to protect you and we're going to make sure that your story is heard. And that was a big moment for me, actually.
Sarain, we've mentioned the fact that we're living through this pandemic, and there's a push right now to get First Nations communities vaccinated as soon as possible, because according to the Canadian government, Indigenous people are up to 5 times more vulnerable to COVID-19. So you filmed and lived on the reservation where your aunt was over the summer. So, and I know you got COVID testing beforehand, but what was that like for you?
That was incredibly difficult. For many Indigenous people, this is not our first pandemic that we lived through. And so I also understand like how privileged I was just to be able to travel, but also the immense responsibility of even choosing to go to my community during a pandemic. So like you said, I got tested several times. I had to live in a tent on her front lawn. And this is the house that I grew up visiting all the time. I've never had to camp out. So it was really hard. I think most of all, it was hard on my auntie, because she just wants to hold me and she wants everything to be normal. And our elders need that from us. So I think it really made me think about our elders and think how much they need us. And if you've got a phone or a way to Skype them or a way to just, talk to them through a window, I think it's so important that we remind our elders how much we love and care about them right now, because they hold our legacies. They're the reason we're here.
And you're adding to that legacy with your film. You are a first-time director, and there is an Indigenous artistic community, a film community, working to tell more stories. What is your perspective on whether or not these works and these stories can change systemic racism in the Canadian entertainment and film industry?
I love this question. So yeah, I'm so proud to be a part of this incredible community of Indigenous storytellers, who so many of them happen to be women, which is just noting. But I think, we need to be in control of our own narrative. You need to see yourself in the world to dream yourself in the world. So I think that the more that we see Indigenous content creators in the mainstream, we see Indigenous stories as a part of the Canadian landscape of our stories, that it changes. It literally changes how we see and feel about Indigenous people. So I think that it's vital. But I also think that Indigenous people need to be even more in the mainstream and not just put as Indigenous content. Like, this is Indigenous content and this is the mainstream. I think it's like, this is Canadian content and we need to be a part of that fabric.
Right.
In terms of systemic racism, I think that we need to be telling truth. And Indigenous people are the only people who can speak our own realities. And so we literally can change the hearts and minds of Canadians by being real and being honest and having the opportunity to speak for ourselves. And I think that that's what we're seeing more and more of.
Sarain Fox, thank you for your honesty and your realness. It was a pleasure having you today.
Chimigwich, thank you guys so much. It's always a pleasure to have the opportunity to share with each other.
For everyone watching, Inendi is available for streaming now. Go and watch it. We'll be right back.